The foreign secretary made comparisons between the current crisis with Russia and Nazi Germany. He said that failure to stand up to Russia's pattern of provocative behavior would only encourage the Kremlin in its revanchist feeling. Mr. Johnson said it was wholly apposite to point out the similarities between the two regimes after he likened Russia's annexation of Crimea to the occupation of the Sudetenland by Hitler's forces in 1938. When Mr. Johnson was asked about the EU's failure to take action when Russian troops entered the territory in 2014, he said, "We didn't do anything about the Sudetenland, you know. Russia annexed a sovereign European territory, has been involved in an assassination attempt in Montenegro, has allowed its client state Syria to conduct gas attacks against innocent civilians, and has now engaged in an attempted assassination in Wiltshire." The foreign secretary made comparisons between the current crisis with Russia and Nazi Germany. "I think it's a wholly opposite point that this is a regime that has annexed a piece of sovereign European territory. The Sudetenland, a former territory of Czechoslovakia, was occupied by Hitler in 1938 after he said that Germans had been mistreated in the region. Despite the occupation violating international treaties, Neville Chamberlain, who was prime minister at the time, refused to intervene. Instead, he pursued a policy of appeasement that lasted until the start of the war in 1939. Similarly, Russian forces entered Crimea in March 2014 after being ordered by Mr. Putin, who's seizing control of its parliament, airports and military bases. Mr. Johnson's latest comments come after he told a parliamentary committee on Wednesday that it was certainly right to compare this summer's FIFA World Cup in Russia to the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany. Mr. Johnson told MPs on Wednesday that the thought of Putin glorying on the world stage in the wake of the Salisbury attack was an emetic prospect after he compared the tournament to the Berlin Games. Getty Johnson said it was wholly opposite to point out the similarities between the two regimes. Mr. Johnson's comments sparked a furious reply from Russia, who accused him of being poisoned with venom of hate, unprofessionalism and boorishness. During a visit to Lincoln on Thursday, Mr. Johnson said he stood by his earlier comments. He said, "I totally stick to my point that to have a great sporting festival in which everybody pays tribute to that regime seems to me to carry some echoes of 1936. I'm not saying it's a perfect analogy and everybody understands that, but it certainly seems to carry some echoes of 1936. Salisbury is part of a pattern of provocative behavior that we see across the Western world at the moment, and it's one of the reasons that Britain has received such overwhelming support from other countries in the last couple of weeks." Getty. Russian forces entered Crimea in March 2014. When you talk about planes having to be scrambled from RAF Coningsby to deal with Russian planes testing us, probing us, seeing what our defenses are like, that's something that loads of countries are now coming to be familiar with. He added that European leaders were getting behind the UK because they recognized Russia's pattern of provocative behavior. This follows on from the decision by the bloc to issue a joint statement in support of Theresa May whereby she said it was highly likely that Russia was behind the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter, Yulia,